Nathan Birch, and I am the CEO of a company called Interbrand, which is a global branding agency.
That's great. Can you please tell me about your decision to attend the University of Aberdeen and what factors influence your choice?
Yeah, I was brought up in Yorkshire, and actually my decision to attend Aberdeen was probably not the usual one. I actually took a year off after school and worked in Hong Kong, and didn't actually want to come back to the UK and attend university. I was very lucky. I got a job in Hong Kong, and I thought, no, there's no way I need to even attend university. So I quite petulantly, as a 19-year-old, told my parents that I wasn't coming home. At which point I was told I was going to come home and I was going to do a degree. And through a kind of teenage kind of fit of rage, I stuck a compass in my hometown in Yorkshire and drew a circle around it because I decided I wanted to move away as far as possible from my hometown.
Yeah.
And Aberdeen was the furthest north than Exeter and Plymouth was south. So my decision was based on geographical distance away from my home. That was the decision I made for Aberdeen, or certainly the story I tell most people. I was looking for a university with quite a collegiate atmosphere, and I was looking for a university which had some kind of tradition and some kind of history and heritage too. So I was very lucky and fortunate that I decided Aberdeen was the place to go, and a decision I have not regretted since that day. I thought it was the most wonderful place to go to university.
This is very interesting answer.
So, what were some of your favorite courses and electives while being in Aberdeen?
So, I actually did economics and management studies, and in retrospect, I can't remember the name, but the management course, the management science courses which I did, and the economics courses. While at the time I didn't really have a great passion for them, I think in retrospect, they kind of piqued my interest. I became a management consultant, so obviously the management science courses were essential. They were the first kind of glimpse into what I'd eventually do for a long time in my career. And only yesterday morning in the car, coming home, I was listening to a podcast from an economist, and I was thinking, at the time, it was not really a thing. If I'd imagined, 25 years later, I would still be interested in, world economics, quite specific macro and microeconomic policies, and I think that was the most interesting thing, that economics at the time didn't really pique my interest, but in later life I've used it a lot and I still have a great interest in it. So the economics courses were amazing, and the management studies courses, I can't remember the name of the lecturer, but actually he was quite influential in my career. So they were the two things which I really enjoyed, and really in retrospect, if I had the opportunity again, I'd probably go back and read some of the old textbooks and see whether or not the economic theory which I was being taught 25 years ago still stands up today.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Were there any particular challenges or obstacles that you faced during your time at University of Aberdeen?
Challenges or obstacles. The biggest obstacle was getting up in the morning to go to the rowing. That was
Fair
the
enough.
biggest issue. And being a tidal river, it used to, obviously you get up at different times. So I actually thought my student life was absolutely idyllic. In fact, I've got I've got a 17-year-old. She's almost 18-year-old. She's just finished her what they call HSC exams, which is A-level and higher's equivalent here in Sydney, and I'm really keen for her to to go away. Many people in Australia, they stay in their home town, they live at home, they don't really travel like we do in the UK. But I'm kind of enthusiastic, let's just say, for her to go away. We're in Sydney. I'd like her to get to Melbourne or a university to experience that kind of that lifestyle. So no real challenges or obstacles other than getting up in the morning and dealing with the cold. I am a Yorkshireman at heart, so my biggest challenge was trying to find a beer which I actually like to drink in Scotland.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, that's funny. Did you engage in any student clubs, organizations, and societies like you mentioned before that you did rowing? Did you do anything else?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be the captain of the rowing club, the University Rowing Club in my final year. And if anybody really knows, it was kind of life-consuming. I went to university to row as much as I did to study. But yeah, in my first year, I actually did a range of things. I joined the fencing club. I joined the rugby club. I skied on a regular basis. So the sports clubs were amazing. I really enjoyed that. I think I was involved in the debating club and the wine tasting club of all things. But yeah, the access to those, access to the kind of wide and varied kind of societies and clubs was amazing in my first year. I then really led into the kind of sporting clubs. And as I said, in my second year, I started rowing, and then third year I was treasurer, fourth year I was captain. I was introduced to a sport which, as I've continued throughout my life, I'm still very heavily involved in rowing in Australia. I continued rowing after university, and wherever I've lived in the world, either in London or in New York or Sydney or Australia, I've always been very heavily involved in rowing, either as a competitor, either as a coach, or now I'm a commentator for Rowing Australia. So I can regularly be seen on YouTube and various TV kind of stations commenting on the rowing. So yeah, it was something which I'd never had access to before in school and in Yorkshire, and got to university, and it was something which I've absolutely had a huge passion for the rest of my life.
That's amazing. Are there any lifelong friendships or connections that you made during your time at university?
Yeah, huge. Yeah. There's been, it's funny. In fact, my best friend from, he lived in Scotland. He lived in Birch at the moment. His best friend and his family, he's got 3 kids now, are coming to visit me in about 2 weeks. So they are flying out from Scotland, and they're coming home for Christmas. So yeah, the friends you make at university is, you're all in the same boat. We're still in regular touch. Richard, John, David, Hugh, they're all very much part of my life, as much as they can be when they're all staying, they all live back in the UK. So, Bristol or Shropshire or Perthshire, it's a long way for us to pop around and have a cup of tea, but yeah, as much as possible. With all the joys of social media bring is the connection back to, the friends you make at university. So yeah, very much still, it's amazing. I'm going to introduce my 3 daughters to John's 3 sons. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's really nice. So what were your career aspirations while attending and upon finishing Aberdeen, and how have they changed, like from the start to the end of your university time?
Yeah, I think when I started, I particularly chose economics and management because it was an introduction into the language of business, effectively. And at the time, when I graduated, I like lots of people probably do, had a kind of view that I wanted to go into banking. And I tried around the traps to many of the kind of the big investment banks. Didn't get any success at all. But was very lucky to be accepted onto the General Electric, what was called the Financial Management Program. It was a graduate scheme at the time. And at the time in the UK, General Electric wasn't really known as an organisation. It was the biggest organisation. It was the biggest business in the world at the time. And to be accepted into the FMP program, which I think I was one of 12 across Europe, I didn't realise how significant, how big, how incredible the scheme was. But yeah, when I was at university, I had a view that I wanted to be a banker, and I think after going through the process with the big banks, which at the time were only really hiring from Oxford or Cambridge, it just wasn't the time that I would have been looking. I was also not a first class honours student. I left with a 2-1, so I wasn't the brightest spark in that by any imagination. But I was very lucky to get on this GE program, and through that I travelled across the world and saw an amazing amount of businesses. At the time, GE Lighting had made everything from lighters and toasters right through to sorry, not lighters. They made GE Lighting made light bulbs and toasters and fridges right through to military jet engines and nuclear power stations. So I was lucky enough to start on their graduate scheme. I actually started at NBC Television. They owned NBC at the time, and I did rotations in London, in Budapest. I did rotations in New York and Connecticut, and saw, NBC Television. I saw lighting factories in Budapest. I saw medical imaging factories in Kansas, and I saw the credit card business in London. So I was incredibly lucky to get on that. But what that taught me was that I didn't want to go into finance. I didn't want to be a financial controller, and it kind of put me off this idea of I didn't want to spend most of my time being a banker. So I then graduated from the program, and like 50%, 60% of my graduating kind of colleagues, I actually left GE and worked for a boutique management consultancy called Burlington Consultants in London for a number of years. And we were doing typical strategy consulting and what's known as commercial due diligence for private equity and VC clients. And that was an incredible time in the kind of early 2000s. It was the first tech boom, and there was some interesting kind of things going on in the tech world. It was really just the emergence of the digital age, and I did that for a number of years, and then was fortunate enough to move from consulting into a client-side role where I was a head of strategy for Orange mobile phones in the UK. And again, from a mobile phone perspective, it was a time when broadband was just an emerging thing. And Orange had a number of different acquisitions across Europe. They obviously were a tremendously successful brand in the UK. We put together some of the voice over IP brands, some of the emerging broadband. They had a brand called Wanadoo, which was a French brand. Put those together over a number of years. And then at that stage, like many people who moved to London, I met Australian, we had a baby, and she dragged me kicking and screaming back to Australia, which I've been for the last 17 years.
That's phenomenal, honestly. Another question. What are some key factors that help you to keep you motivated during your time at university? Key factors. I think when you are at
in retrospect, it's easy to look back at the university time with rose-tinted spectacles, and in the moment, the struggles that you have, or certainly I had with, exam pressure, being away from home, money. I think you don't really appreciate how what are the opportunities that are in front of you. You go to university and you have these amazing opportunities, and really, although I was lucky enough to land on something which I've loved since. I would say to anybody, just throw yourself in. I was quite a naive boy from Yorkshire, quite insulated. I'd gone from a small village really in Yorkshire. I'd taken a year off and moved to Hong Kong, which at the time was an incredible difference in terms of scale and size, and different country and different culture. But when I came to university, I think I had all these opportunities only me. My advice was, do things which make you slightly uncomfortable. I might be left of field. It's amazing what you will find and the people that you meet. So what motivated me at university was, A, developing those friendships that you will have for life. B, access to experiences that you will never, you never thought, you never even dreamt of. So one of the things which I just absolutely adored at university was the Scottish tradition and heritage. I'd never really been and never really had access to that. But I remember my first ceilidh. I had no idea what a ceilidh was, and absolutely loved it. And I have some kind of tenuous connections back to Scotland through family members. And was very, very keen to then kind of, almost kind of pseudo take on a kind of my Scottishness, which goes a long way back in the family tree. But I loved the real mixture of kind of tradition and the customs that I was which were kind of I was injected to in Aberdeen. I loved the architecture. I loved the kind of social scene, and that was really hugely exciting for me. Hugely exciting for me. So the friends, the experiences, the access to experiences, and again, in retrospect, it's easy to say, I mentioned it before, but you might not think, that this current course, it's only a means to an end to pass an exam, but it just sparks a bit of an interest if you're lucky enough to maintain an intellectual kind of interest in things which will last you for the rest of your life, or certainly did with me. So that's what I would say. That's what kept me motivated.
All right, thank you. Can you describe your job and responsibilities as the CEO of Interbrand and how they differ from your previous jobs and occupations?
Yeah. So at the moment, I run an agency in Sydney. I'm responsible for Sydney and I'm not responsible for Australia and New Zealand. But Interbrand is the world's leading brand consulting. So we develop brands, the strategy around brands. We give confidence for clients to develop and grow and manage the world's most recognizable brands. So in Australia in particular, we did the Sydney Opera House brand. We've done Telstra, which is the biggest mobile phone operator. We've done Coles, one of the second biggest supermarket, and we've done Westpac, one of the big four banks in Australia. So we do a lot of the what we call the big end of town brands. We've also done a lot of not-for-profit and smaller brands. And what we do is develop the brand strategy and also the visual identity. So yes, we do logos and we do naming and things like that, but it's actually the positioning and the growth plan of a brand. A brand being the real articulation of a business strategy. And I've done that I've been CEO for the last almost 8 years. And coming from a management consultant background. I was traditionally a management consultant. As I mentioned in my time in the UK, I moved to Australia 17 years ago. I was working for KPMG, and I ran their commercial due diligence department, so very much in transactions and M&A. And then I joined Deloitte Digital, and I ran the strat department in Sydney for a number of years when businesses were all about actually what are we going to do with our digital strategy. And then moving to this role, it was very similar. Looking at that brand as a strategic asset was one of the reasons why I joined. So I run a team here of designers and brand strategists and writers who are all super talented, have capabilities and skills which I don't have. And yeah, we're part of a global network. So we've got 19 offices in 5 different continents. And we've developed some of the world's most recognizable brands, from Google and Microsoft to AT&T, Starbucks, Juventus Football Club, Mini, British Airways. I could go on and on and on.
That's incredible. Why did you decide to go back to university and acquire another degree at Babson College?
Oh, that was very much through work. It was Babson's an amazing place that we're lucky enough to go through. We're owned by Omnicom, one of the world's biggest advertising, marketing, and communications holding companies. And it was an executive education piece. So it wasn't a degree; it's an executive education program. And yeah, we were lucky enough through Omnicom University to have access to many of the kind of marketing and business professors at Harvard. It was actually quite an incredible experience to get access, along with many of my peers across the Omnicom kind of group of companies, senior leaders within there, to have access to some of the brightest minds and some of the cutting edge research in business through Harvard. So yeah, that was quite an incredible experience. I've done a lot of the executive courses available online, and I do them on a regular basis. I've now actually moved from taking courses to running courses. I've recently finished a brand leadership piece of work with the University of Sydney Business School, where not being so much of a student now, but more of a guest lecturer, maybe, let's say. But I think if you are passionate about your job, I think it would be very remiss of anybody who is passionate to stop learning about it. And the stuff that I saw at Babson was very, very cutting edge, particularly focused around brands and marketing. So yeah, it was an interesting time, and seeing what happens at Babson and just outside Boston was a great experience as well.
All right.
I wouldn't swap it for Aberdeen though.
Yeah. So throughout your whole career, what were some challenging moments, and how do they compare to the things that you thought were challenging in Aberdeen, like looking back at it in retrospect?
With challenging moments, yeah, there's been some absolutely, in career-wise, there's absolutely been some challenging moments. I suppose on a very personal level, I'm an ambassador for a charity called November. So I've struggled with mental health, certainly through kind of in my late 30s and my early 40s. I struggled through mental health, like many middle-aged kind of men do, and that was a real challenge, and led me to talk about my struggles with mental health more publicly. I had a very close friend who took his own life, and a lot of what he went through, I was going through as well, and it was a real point in my life where I realised that it wasn't. It wasn't. We don't talk about. We certainly didn't 10 years ago. Didn't talk about mental health, particularly male mental health in the workplace as much as we should. And at the time, I was working for Deloitte, and I do since then think that there are atmospheres, particularly in professional services, consulting, law firms, which are not healthy, at all. So that's been probably my biggest challenge from a personal perspective, but it has, in kind of an ironic way, led to some of the work I do at the moment for November, and particularly there's a global charity event called the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride, and it's a motorbike ride around, I think it's 450 different cities across the world. I'm sure there's one in Aberdeen, where lots of like-minded people who have got a particular passion for either male mental health or prostate or testicular cancer. It's an excuse. We get dressed up and we drive around in motorbikes, or we drive around in old cars for one day. And that's it started by a guy called Mark Power, who's based in Sydney, and has become a dear friend. And that's ironically led to some of my kind of personal purpose, which I think is really important. So that's been probably my biggest personal challenge. But I think the challenge, which is even more interesting today and facing some of the graduates, is this idea that your career will be transient. I started out finance, I moved into consulting, I moved into finance. I was kind of a bit of an anomaly, really. But I think for the graduates of today, it's a lot less planned out than it was for me. It's a lot more ambiguous. Either the job you will do, even the location of the job you will do. This idea post-COVID that we no longer really go into the office 5 days a week anymore. The idea of doing that now is almost alien to a lot of the guys I hire, who come out of university. This idea that you're in the office from 9 till 5, it seems such an alien concept now, and it's changed in a very, very short space of time. So I think this idea of becoming used to and becoming comfortable with ambiguity, with incomplete data, with volatility, with uncertainty, they're really going to be the graduates today are going to become a lot more adept at managing that to be successful in the workplace, I think. So that will be an interesting challenge.
That's an incredible answer. How would you say your mindset and way of working have changed since attending University of Aberdeen?
It goes back to the previous answer, really. I think what the university showed me was not to be afraid of things you didn't really have a complete 100% grasp of. There's certainly, I think, this idea of putting yourself in situations which you might not be used to, you might feel slightly uncomfortable to, rising to the challenge, that the self-confidence and belief that, you can do things, which is kind of, that spark is really ignited at university. Or it certainly was for me. I think that almost inner confidence that particularly Aberdeen gave to me was that, hey, I might not know how to dance the Dashing White Sergeant or Strip the Willow on my first Kaylee, but you know what? I'll give it a go, and by the end of it, I could do a Kaylee as good as anybody. So it was that kind of inner confidence and self-belief that you can do this, you can get this. You might not be an expert, but the confidence that university gives you carries on through work, right? So that, I think that for me was really important, and that's really been central to my mindset with any job. Even moving to Australia, I didn't know anybody other than my wife. I had no family connections, I had no friends here, but there was a confidence that I've got this, I can do it. I've faced other challenges, I think that's really. I think university gave me that, which is it stood me in good stead. In good stead.
Yeah. So going back to stress and mental health. So a lot of students struggle with stress in their university career. What advice would you have for students who struggle with stress, and like how would you deal with that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I see my daughter's 17. She's just about to go to university. I can see some of the things that she's going to be faced with. And it's still kind of a mirror of what happens later in life, and certainly my experience. My first thing is, and my advice to anybody, I speak often to individuals about this, is there is no point, there is no benefit for the mindset of, oh, I'll just, it will go away. I will just put this out. The difference between stress and anxiety, stress is a natural behavior. It's a natural human behavior. Somebody said to me the other day, it goes all the way back when we were running around, in caves, and that ruffle in the bushes may have been something that you could eat or something that could eat you, and that stress reaction is natural. When it turns over into depression and anxiety, is when you have a failure to concentrate, to operate within that normal kind of context and confines of the everyday pressures and stresses that you might have. From my personal experience, and I suppose being kind of maybe from the UK, that kind of stiff upper lip mentality, I'll get through this, doesn't work. So my first advice is go and speak to someone. And if you don't go to speak to someone, you can't pull yourself out of it. It just doesn't work like that. Mental illness does not work like that. You need to go and speak to someone. Now, that someone could be absolutely your friend or your colleague or a teacher or a lecturer, but I would absolutely strongly advise you go and speak to somebody who has a professional background in mental health. And if you don't get the answer you want, that's not the right person for you. Myself, I went to see 3 different doctors. I said, look, I'm struggling at work. And I got from 2 of them, yeah, you need to lose weight, you need to drink less, you get more sleep, drink more water. And they just didn't understand it. And it wasn't until the 3rd doctor who said, look, I'm going to refer you to a psychologist at the time and then a psychiatrist. And then it wasn't until that point I realized, actually, this is not something I can fix myself and I do need help. So I would absolutely implore anybody who is feeling this way, particularly, if they're feeling suicidal and things like that, to go and speak to somebody, whether it's pick up the phone to some of the many people, and charity organisations in the UK that deal with mental health, or access university services, the medical. I'm sure it wasn't an issue for me. I didn't do it when I was at university, but I'm sure there are multiple avenues to access, student support services at the university. Please go and speak to somebody who knows about these things. Too many times, and in my situation, my best friend didn't reach out to me, didn't reach out to his wife, didn't reach out to anybody, and the tragic inevitability of that was that he kept very silent and took his own life and left behind a 6-month-old and a 3-year-old and his wife. And, I constantly think about, well, what about if he'd have reached out to someone who would have been able to direct him, see the situation he was in and direct him on the right path. And I always say to people, the first step is really admitting to yourself that you can't fix it yourself, and then going to see somebody who can actually help you, and being quite persistent in that. And that's the first 2 steps to then start digging yourself out of the hole.
Thank you. This is very useful answer. Thank you. During your time at university, did you engage in any internships, part-time jobs, or volunteering work?
Yeah, I did. I was a doorman at the Lemon Tree Club. I don't know if it's still there.
I think it is still there.
Is it still there?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I I was, not being the biggest guy in the world. I was a doorman at the Lemon Tree. That was my part-time job, which involved me standing at the door and telling people who were usually drunk or underage, no, they could or couldn't come into the Lemon Tree. Lemon Tree was a comedy slash music venue at the time. So that was my only job, which I enjoyed immensely. But then again, I did spend most of my time down at the boat club, to be perfectly honest.
Right. What was your journey like to get to the position of CEO, and what do you think you did differently from other people such as yourself that helped you get to the place where you are today?
What did I do differently? I can't claim it. You know what? I've been tremendously lucky throughout my life. I was lucky to go north instead of south. At that moment, I stuck my compass in a little village in Yorkshire, and I drew the circle. I was lucky to, I think I worked out that something like 6 miles further north. Aberdeen was 6 miles further north than I think it was Plymouth was south. So it was I was lucky, in that regard. I was lucky to get on my post-university internship. I was lucky to work at GE and have some amazing experiences. I was lucky to meet somebody in London who eventually brought me to Australia. I worked for KPMG and Deloitte. I was lucky to be given a role in an industry which I had no real experience with. So luck plays a massive part of my life. But in terms of what I've had any influence on, I think again it goes back to trying new experiences. The confidence that was kind of the university was the catalyst of the confidence to try new things. And I tried rowing there, which has been a big part of my life. It was the catalyst for the confidence that you need to be more, to exploit the opportunities that inevitably life puts in front of you, and have a kind of a mindset that actually, I can make this work, or I can certainly fake it until I make it, and see what life throws in front of you. So, luck and just the confidence or just the willingness or openness for new opportunities, I think is, maybe the consistent theme to where I am today.
Thank you. This is an incredible answer. And the last question for today is, if you could go back in time, would you change anything about your experience at University of Aberdeen? Or would you give yourself any advice?
I'd love, if you guys can invent a time machine, take me back to when I was 19 in Scotland, I would love it. Would I give myself any advice? It's a really interesting question. Do you know what? I would have probably have said, try more, try harder at your studies, because you don't realise that, at the time, my kind of prevailing view was, certainly a degree was just another step to get a job. It was the way, to progress. And I think that's changed. And I think what I would have done is it's actually been a bit more, not selective, but probably a bit broader in my thinking about what some of the courses I took. Through work, I've developed much more interest in psychology, in semantics, in ethics. And I think the access to all those different types of modules, or learned, access to people who are much more learned in those areas through the university, I would have probably appreciated more back at the time. And I go back now, and as I said, I'm still interested in economics, even though I've never really kind of really used it now in my day-to-day job. But the kind of contextual of the economic situation, the geopolitical situation, what's going on around the world, I would love to be able to have that much more accessible. So I would have probably said, just expand your mind and thinking a bit broader. at university. Other than that, yeah, I would have. Yeah, there are certainly some nights at the Bobbin which I would have rewound. You guys are nodding there. No, but you know what? I have nothing but amazing memory at university. The people I met, the things I did, the place itself is quite magical. Whenever I mention to people kind of in work, I went to university in Aberdeen. The first reaction is, wow, it's cold. And then it's usually, either the Granite City or the Silver City. And then I explain to them, just what an incredible university environment it is. I think, there's nothing I would have regretted. I wouldn't change a thing.
Thank you very much.